broadcast network, Afterbuzz TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your number one source for after-show entertainment. Afterbuzz TV, the destination for TV superfans. Producing aftershows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows, interviewing celebrities and showrunners, and bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Let's just enjoy this for a while, guys. Oh, that's right, guys. We got daddy issues all over the place on Second Chance. So, of course, we had to come in with the classic Cats in the Cradle. I don't know if it's karaoke staple for you, but in my neck of the woods it is. We good? We here? I think my headphones went out. But that's okay. We're here with episode 3. There we are. I'm back. We're here with episode 3 of the official Second Chance after show right here on AfterBuzz TV. And whoo, we got a lot to unpack. Just like always, this show, it's a show that's very, very plot heavy, very plot driven, and we got a lot to talk about. My name is Ty Matthews. You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, at Ty Matthews PMA. Gotta find my camera. Find me on that. Remember, on iTunes, download, rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you like what we're doing, let us know. We want to hear from you, and we want to talk to you. And of course, as always, my very lovely, very talented co-host.
Hey, I'm Jamie Banks, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at JamieBanks_.
You are right. You can.
Thank you. And I read every comment on YouTube and all your tweets, so I love to hear from you guys.
Everyone, you are a brave girl reading YouTube comments. You are just...
Yeah, all the positive ones I
like. Well, you know what? Let's start with the biggest part of, we can turn Harry Chapin down a little bit. It's fine. As much as I enjoyed this song. Let's talk about the ending of this episode right up top. The big, big moment that I don't think either of us saw is coming. Duval knows. Duval now knows. Mary told him that Jimmy is his father. What do we think about this?
I feel like it came really early in the season to already put that out there. Sure. I thought that would come later, and I feel like that kind of takes away some of the suspense. But I think that there must be a lot coming throughout the season if they're going to put that information out there that early. Sure,
yeah, definitely. I thought that I don't even necessarily think that I was expecting it to come in the finale. I thought maybe we were going to get a little bit of a tease of it in the finale. Maybe like, he finds some piece of evidence that's irrefutable. But I mean, right up top, episode 3, he knows now. And I think I get what you're saying, but maybe do we think that there's an aspect where maybe it even adds a little more suspense now? How are they gonna coexist? How is Duval going to wrap his head around these billionaire twins playing God with his own father?
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, now that he knows this piece of information, he knows that Otto actually did something illegal, or he's not sure the specifics. So would he want to turn them in, or how is this going to play out?
Sure. And I think, wherever Looking Glass is involved, we know there's a lot of illegal activity in play, something like that. And of course, Duval has his problems with that, but I think he might be getting a little bit, he might be, being okay with that. He might be getting a little bit more like his old man in kind of being okay with, playing loose with the rules.
True, I think so. And also later in the episode, they say, there's some information that we obtained illegally. Are you okay with that? And he is, so.
Now, lots to talk about. We start off. One of my favorite things about this show so far is just the use of music and the use of editing and cinematography and things like that. And we start off very kind of serene, this beautiful music, and we see these protesters. They're going to go. They've got these biohazard suits and these gas masks, and they chain themselves to this gate. And then the very last one, who's supposed to fall in line with the rest of them, just takes an axe to every single one of them. And it's interesting that, you know, this show, it strikes you as kind of just a normal cop drama, you know, an action procedural, whatever. But we get, it seems like a lot of almost straight up horror elements.
Yeah, I felt like it was really gruesome, and I was honestly a little shocked at that. I just didn't see it coming, especially because it was such a peaceful montage with Otto and Mary sharing the blood, and then it was like peaceful music, and then boom, the axe murder.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, you mentioned the blood exchange between Jimmy and Mary, and it's the fact that I love that there's this awkwardness where they're just completely silent. They're not even speaking, you know? Yeah. Do we think that Mary is kind of trying to keep her emotions in check?
I think so, but as they mentioned, it was kind of an intimate experience, and when she says she needs a little breather and steps away, he's like, oh, did you feel the connection too?
Right.
So it was a little bit of a weird moment, but I think that it was like a personal moment that they were sharing.
Sure. And I think, yeah, I love that Jimmy has this love to kind of, you know, really make Mary squirm and say exactly the right things to make her completely uncomfortable. I think he's finally starting to settle into this new role as a much younger, a much stronger man, and so I think he's kind of having fun with it.
Yeah,
you know?
He's very smug. Like, he makes his comments with like a big smile, and he's like, "Hey."
Right, exactly. Just like that.
Just like
nailing it. But I love that there's, you know, there are highs and lows in each episode. We go from such a dark, gruesome scene, like a friggin' multiple axe fueled homicide, to like legitimately, this episode was really, really funny and got a lot of legitimate laughs out of me. I do love how Rob Kaczynski plays this character of Jimmy Pritchard, and he's very, you know, he's charming and he's affable, and even though he has to sometimes do these dark things that he doesn't want to, he's still just a likable guy.
Yeah, I think he's really charming. He definitely, in some ways, is the anti-hero, but he overall is very likable, and he does want to do the right thing. So at the end of the day, he's a likable character. Right.
It's like I said last week, guys, he's just Batman. Jimmy's Batman. That's all I'm saying. Also, watching this episode, we saw a lot of commercials for Lucifer, and I really, something that I want to see is a crossover between Second Chance and Lucifer. Fox execs, if you're watching, can we get Frankenstein and the devil to team up to solve crimes? Can we get that? At least just for a one-off, just for like a special event.
That sounds scary. I don't think I'll tune into that one. Anything called Lucifer, I'm a little bit timid of.
Oh, Jamie. Oh, man. But so, you know, we see these murders and these protesters and things like that. And so Mary and Otto are kind of looking into it. Jimmy's looking into it. Jimmy has told Arthur to kind of flag these instances for him, you know, all of these cases that his son is working on. I think it's partly, you know, out of a sense of justice, out of a sense of, you know, righting the wrongs, but he just wants to protect his son. He wants to kind of watch out for him and make sure, you know, he's not in harm's way.
I think he definitely wants to protect the people, but also be protecting the people with the help of his son. And I think he likes the father-son duo too. So I think that's why he had Arthur flag those. Sure.
Now, speaking of father-son dynamics, we see that you know, Duke Davis, he's this kind of crooked politician that Jimmy knew throughout his previous life as the sheriff, and he's conveniently had this security footage deleted that they need to find out who perpetrated these crimes, you know? And it's interesting that Jimmy can draw upon that experience and his, you know, decades of being the sheriff to really find these kind of crooked cops and these dirty characters in a really quick and efficient way.
Yeah, well, I think he probably, when he was the sheriff, he probably had some people that he knew were bad but could never prove that they were.
Exactly.
So it probably just rang a bell with him, and he's like, oh, I've dealt with this guy before. There's been issues with him before. He's probably involved somehow.
Right. And that's one of those things that kind of drove him to using not quite so legal methods to find who he needed to, you know, because he couldn't always make it stick. And so we see Duval is, you know, he knows that he's found out that there's a familial match on those fingerprints from the glass that he took from last week. But you know, he knows there's something else that he needs to know. There are other pieces of the puzzle that are missing.
I think he can just tell that Jimmy is lying to him because he is an FBI. So I think he's trained, and so he kind of knows when something's up, and so something just seems very fishy to him.
Right, and not only that, but he knows that Looking Glass is connected somehow.
Right.
You know, he knows that they have some sort of hand in this. Now he goes over and he interacts with Otto, and this is kind of the first time that we've seen Duval interact with Otto. You know, we've seen him interact with Mary, who's very charming, who's very persuasive, who knows kind of the rules that Duval is playing by. But Otto, he's very neurotic, and he's very he doesn't have those interpersonal social skills.
This is the first time we're also seeing Otto interact with someone other than Mary and Jimmy.
Right.
And it seems like he goes to Arthur for advice a lot on what to do, and Arthur was like, with your skills and intelligence, you're gonna 60% chance gonna be in trouble. So
right.
I think Arthur kind of foresaw that situation.
Right. And it's interesting that Otto has sort of almost created this protector for him, that he can very kind of clinically and very scientifically go in and find the chances of things going awry, you know, down to a 62% chance of him going to jail through, you know, either slipping up or Duval finding something, you know. And I think there's, you know, we see Duval kind of handling a lot of things and touching a lot of things, and I think he knows how much that bothers Otto, and he knows that he can kind of prey on him in that way.
Right, but what do you think he could have found just exploring the house like that? Like touching wise?
Not necessarily finding something, but he knows that he can make Otto so nervous and so kind of on edge just by moving things out of their natural order that I think he knows how to kind of exploit that as one of Otto's weaknesses.
Yeah, I think Otto might have some sort of OCD as far as things being in order, because I noticed in the first episode, this was a really small little thing, but he was eating Swedish fish candy, and he had them like all lined up in a row.
Right.
So this could be part of his character too.
Yeah, absolutely. And he is this sort of genius and this savant kind of that can, you know, it's not like Rain Man. He's, you know, but he's had such a large hand in developing Looking Glass, but at the same time he can barely talk to people. He doesn't even want Duval to sit down. You know, I love that moment where he says that, you know, we can sit down, but not in my chair, and they're all my chairs. But not only that, but one of the things that I thought of watching this episode, and it's that it seems like Alexa, Mary's assistant, is almost just as protective of her as Otto is.
In a different way, yeah. It was funny when she mentioned that line about the Venn diagram and was like, "And which circle do you fall into? Academic?"
Right.
I can't remember the others, but
yeah, she's so kind of overly protective, both because Mary is, you know, just her closest confidant, but also because Mary's dying basically, and she doesn't really know about these treatments until Mary has to kind of finally sit her down and slow her down and go, "Look, this is what's happening."
I wonder if Alexa kind of sees her as a mentor or someone she really looks up to, because Mary is very successful.
Sure.
And so maybe that's why she's also so protective of her.
Right, definitely. And I think that's another one of the reasons that Mary decided to go along with this whole, I guess, kind of experiment, if you want to call it that, or bringing Jimmy back, is because she knows that, you know, obviously she doesn't want to die, but she has all of these people that are looking up to her. She's got Otto and she's got Alexa that might, you know, to varying degrees be lost without her.
That is an interesting point too.
So, you know, they track down Jimmy, and Mary track down, you know, where Duke is kind of holed up because his people are telling him that he can't really go out into the public with all of this, all these killings going on, because those protesters were protesting this guy Duke Davis's company, you know, this kind of coal, this energy company. And so he's obviously a very specific, or a very suspicious character rather, can't really, you know, go out into public, can't really say anything on the record. But we do see that he's in there and he's sparring with his son, and he's being pretty aggressive with him, you know. And that's where we see more of these father-son dynamics come into play.
And when Jimmy fights Duke and then wins, and the son says, "Oh, great job, you basically kicked his butt."
Right.
It was an interesting thing there, because it was like, oh, did you want him to lose? Like, what is that relationship there?
Right. And yeah, you can tell that Duke has kind of a history of really beating on Asher. And as Asher says later on, that's kind of how he feels big. He kind of asserts his dominance over his son, in this kind of quote unquote sparring setting. And it's interesting seeing Jimmy almost get protective, because I think he knows that he wasn't the best father. So when he sees other people kind of failing at being a father or kind of taking it for granted or even, borderline abusing their children, I think he gets overly protective,
That is interesting. I don't think Jimmy would have ever abused his children. So I think even though they did have a little rocky relationship, I think you're right. The father in him is like, this isn't right.
Sure. Neglect, yes. Abuse, no. Come on, that's too far. The sheriff would not do that.
No.
But he does get very protective, and he goes in and he decides, almost in a moment of, why don't you pick on someone your own size? So he goes in there, starts sparring with Duke, and with his kind of superhuman reflexes, he can keep him going for so long while Mary explores the rest of the house, basically. Mm-hmm. She finds the family crest. She finds this motto that says De Tenebris Phoebus, this Latin phrase that's on their crest. And they're trying to figure out, back from those axe murderers, there are these letters carved into their foreheads, and they're trying to figure out what those mean. And so Mary deduces from this Latin phrase what those mean, finally lets them go. But what I loved is this moment where Jimmy has Duke kind of on the ropes, literally, and he's got his fist raised, and we still don't know if he punches someone full force, what's going to happen.
True. He could be paralyzed. We don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. He could have straight up murdered Duke Davis in that boxing ring, and then where would we be?
It's true. Good thing Mary jumped in and said, that's enough.
Right. Well, and I think she kind of has a better idea than Jimmy does of the sort of strength that he has and the power that he has.
Yeah, I don't think he knows his own strength yet.
Right.
And he also doesn't really know his limitations either.
Right.
That'd be interesting. He should do some experiments and kind of get to know his skills better and his strength.
Sure. And we saw a montage last week of him lifting insane amount of weights. It reminds me, guys, if you've seen Unbreakable, M. Night Shyamalan film starring Bruce Willis, that's kind of, he's this almost superhero type figure kind of pushing his limits and just lifting more and more weight just to see how strong he is. And I think even though Jimmy is technically 75 years old, it's like a kid with these powers and kind of, almost like a new toy, kind of amusing himself with it, Yeah. Do we think that we're going to see him kind of go too far at some point?
Maybe at some point, but remember with the bricks, he tried going too far and he wasn't successful. So
sure.
I think maybe there'll be an instance where he's not able to achieve, but I don't think he'll just like fall and die or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen.
Right. Someone may get seriously effed up, and people might catch on to the fact that it wasn't exactly human, whoever did it. And I love the tonal shift also in this scene, from going from investigating an axe murder to almost this really kind of innocent sort of flirtation going on between Mary and Jimmy.
Yeah, they're definitely flirting more, and there's definitely a chemistry there. And I don't know if she realizes it or not, but it's definitely apparent to the viewer.
Yeah, I think she does, and she's definitely, shook up. She's kind of worried about it.
She's like weirded out a little bit.
Well, that's going to throw a whole new monkey wrench into things if and when it obviously, ends up happening.
Well, it's interesting because they kind of alluded to the fact that they could be kind of talking throughout the whole episode, because as an excuse, they're like, oh, we're dating and things like that. So it's kind of like putting it in our head if it wasn't already there.
Yeah. And that is an instance of the show kind of pulling the trigger on something a little bit sooner than I thought they would have. Obviously we see them pulling the trigger on Duval finding out about Jimmy at the end of this episode, but I also thought that they were going to draw out kind of the tension between Jimmy and Mary as well. I didn't think it would be quite so heavy so early on. Well, nothing has
happened yet.
No, but that chemistry is pretty palpable already.
True.
So I think I was expecting that to maybe come a little bit later. But they have this information. Jimmy and Duval meet up at Jimmy's own grave, which I thought was an interesting little meeting place and sort of, almost kind of symbolism.
Yeah, that is a little bit weird.
Right. But one of the things that Duval found out from Otto is that the date that Jimmy showed up basically at Looking Glass, on Mary and Otto's front door, is the exact same day that Jimmy died, that his father died.
I was surprised that Otto actually gave away that information.
Right.
I know that he's socially awkward, but you would have thought that he would have like excluded that information.
Right.
But I guess he just slipped out, or he didn't want to lie.
Right. And I think, it's just that, like we said, that kind of pressure and that sort of nervousness of Duval kind of touching everything and being in his space where he doesn't want anyone that he doesn't trust. I think when pressed, he'll kind of give up that information, and that's why Mary's, the speaker of the two. Mm-hmm. And it's, we see the dynamic between the two, and we see obviously Mary's much better with interpersonal connections.
He even was like, Mary's the one that does the talking.
Right.
Just wait for her. So I think that's kind of his excuse always. If he wants to get out of a social situation, he's just like, wait for Mary, talk to her.
Right.
I'm going to go over here in the corner in my old bedroom.
Right. Yeah, it's 1988 bedroom. Oh, I love that part. I love that he has that sort of technology where he can go to different configurations of his room, But basically we find out that Asher, Duke's son, is kind of a little bit more than just a troubled teen. He's been setting fire to his his residence halls. He's been putting people in comas, and his dad has just kind of been behind him every step of the way, sort of cleaning up.
And it's escalating. And I think one of the reasons why is because every time this happens, he gets away with it. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of like testing his own limits too.
Yeah.
And also it reminded me of Affluenza, which I don't know if you've heard of
it.
Yeah, but
definitely.
Like rich people sometimes don't know the consequences of their own actions. Mm. And this has even been brought up in like courts and stuff.
Right.
So it kind of reminded me of that because it's like he thinks he can get away with anything.
That's absolutely right. That's a very, very good point. And I think that is sort of something that they're trying to touch on, is that he is so rich and so powerful that he feels godlike. And you did mention, I love that point that you made, that he's kind of testing his limits just like Jimmy is. And we see a lot of interesting parallels between Jimmy and Asher, and by extension, Duval and Duke. And one of the things that we were talking about a little before we went on air is that, do we think that there's almost this jealousy, even though this has gone to such an extreme and to such kind of violent ends, do we think there's this jealousy where Duval kind of wishes that he had a father that would go to such great lengths like Asher has?
Possibly, because even though Asher is crazy and a bad guy, just seeing that his father would do that to help him is something that Jimmy never did for him. So I think there could be a slight jealousy there. Or at least it's crossed his mind. Right.
And he even kind of tries to get in Duke's head, and he tries to kind of rationalize in his own brain, if Gracie got into almost as much trouble as Asher is, what would I do to help her? Would I go to these lengths to protect her? And I think that if there's anything that Duval has inherited from Jimmy, it's, kind of this love for his family, even if Jimmy didn't necessarily show it as much as he could have while he was alive.
He did really love them.
Definitely.
On the other hand, when Duke is covering up these awful things that his son is doing, he is saving himself too, because he is the public eye, and he thinks that this would cause embarrassment for his family. So on one hand, he's kind of covering it up to save himself too.
True. Yeah, definitely. He does say that, where he wouldn't be able to handle the publicity, the bad publicity that his son basically being an axe murderer would bring onto the company.
But you can tell that he does love his son, though, too, because
right.
he could have turned his son in and still gotten over the publicity. Like they could have figured out a way to spin it.
Sure. But we see, that motto that Mary found on the family crest, on the Davis family crest. Translated, it means from darkness, the sun, which is an interesting play on words, because it's, from darkness, the sun, obviously, the sun, but also S-O-N, Asher, the literal sun. What does he think that this darkness is that his father represents?
Maybe corruption. I don't know too much about the company that he has, but there are environmental protesters that don't like it. So there could be something like that. And also, it's just a very morbid statement. Like, it's a terrible family crest from darkness, the sun.
It's definitely. We don't really see many family mottos that are that kind of ominous and that dark. But we also see that if if Jimmy is becoming this sort of superhero type character, Asher is kind of the first to almost embody this like comic book villain type of appearance, you know? We see him in front of the mirror and we see, you know, makeup on his face and we see him holding the samurai sword.
Yeah, it was very extreme. I think first when he did the killings, that was very gruesome and kind of scary. But then later when he had the face paint, he just looks kind of like exactly like a comic book figure.
Right. And I think that he's more than anything, he's just kind of acting out for attention in the most dark, kind of graphic way possible. You know, I think his dad is probably one of these absentee fathers, much like Jimmy was, that sort of doesn't really have the time of day for him. And so I think he figures by doing these awful things and by killing these people, that's kind of one of the only ways that, in a weird, twisted way, that his dad and him can bond.
Sort of a cry for help,
right,
I think.
Right.
But a terrible way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So Jimmy and Duval, they go to this country club. They find this cart girl that's kind of, you know, she's a little bit shady. Duval rather hates that Jimmy is tagging along everywhere he goes. You know, he doesn't, as good of a team as they make, Duval still hates the fact that he doesn't do everything completely by the book.
Yeah, I think he doesn't realize what a great asset he is either, because he doesn't know the truth about him and his superhuman qualities and things like that. So I think that's another reason he's hesitant to bring him along. Right.
But another thing that we keep seeing pop up in the show is that Jimmy's methods, as shady as they might be and as illegal as they might be, they produce results. You know, he follows this cart girl to this weird shipping container where this huge rave is going on inside.
Do you think he planned the rave? Did you get that impression that Asher, it was like Asher's party, or do you think it was just a random rave?
I think so. I think that might have been, have been Asher's party. You know,
it just reminded me of like a really rich guy who just can throw parties all the time and have these elaborate costumes and things like that.
Exactly. Like, yeah, he literally has more money than he knows what to do with.
Yeah.
And so he's throwing these crazy raves with these crazy people in costumes with all sorts of designer drugs. You know, I love the line where Jimmy says, back in my day, all you needed was some Mary Jane and some whiskey.
Yeah.
And we see Duval like, what the hell are you talking about?
Day.
And he keeps...
Wasn't that like 5 years ago?
Right, exactly, yeah. Jimmy keeps having to backpedal. You know, I served in the army in Saigon. Wait, no, not Saigon, in Fallujah. Yeah. You know, like he keeps saying these things. And not only that, but we keep seeing Gracie as almost like this kind of Greek chorus where she's, you know, in the first episode, or in the second rather, she says, oh, he's got kind of a sheriff vibe. And I was like, oh, you look just like my grandpa. Oh, like when he would wake up and was hungover and everything. Yeah. You know, I love that everything that Gracie says is kind of right on the nose. She's smart,
I guess. She's catching on.
She's very intuitive. But I think that's another thing that kind of comes into play now that Duval knows Jimmy's secret and knows who he is. Is he going to let Gracie know? Is he going to let Helen know? You know, who is he going to trust with this secret? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I could see him telling Helen. Maybe he wouldn't tell Gracie just because it's so weird. And also, the more people he tells, the more trouble that they could get in. Because I think what they did was illegal.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see who he actually tells.
Sure. Once again, another similarity to Batman. Batman doesn't want anyone knowing his secret identity because that's just going to put them in harm's way.
True.
Guys, Jimmy's just Batman. Looking Glass is Wayne Tech.
Frankenstein and Batman.
Frankenstein and Batman. How much more badass can you get in one person? I'm telling you, bring Lucifer on. We get all of them together. They can solve crimes, weird, screwed up ways. It'll be fun. Instant ratings. But we see Jimmy partying with Asher, and Asher kind of forces him to take these drugs in almost kind of like a Training Day sort of moment. Like, we are going to have a problem.
I was surprised he actually took it. I don't know. I thought he would have spit it out or something.
Well, he does at first. He says, you know what, once he realizes that it's not lethal, that he's not just trying to poison him, I think Jimmy's all right with getting a little bit.
Yeah, I guess.
You know, getting a little bit twizzy, rolling a little bit. But at the end of this high that he's on, where Jimmy's rolling at this party, Asher reveals that he knows that he's there for him. You know, he knows that that's the plan.
It was interesting because in a lot of TV shows, you see the bad guy tell the good guy, I know that you know. And it was basically that moment.
Right. Asher's like, he's kind of like the Joker in this instance, where he desperately wants to be caught. Because if he isn't caught, then what's the fun of it? If nobody knows that he's doing these awful things, what's the point?
Or maybe he doesn't want to be caught, but he wants more of a challenge.
Right, exactly.
Because it's always been so easy for him to get away with all these crimes that he wants just a little bit more of a chase.
Right, exactly. Speaking of chase, Jimmy steals this cart girl's wallet, and they find a receipt for a boarding kennel where she's putting up her dogs. Once again, pretty convenient, but it's fine. And they figure that she's fleeing, that they're gonna hop on a plane and just jet, because of all this heat.
It's interesting because I wonder what she thought. Did she know that Asher committed the murders, or did she just think he was involved somehow? Because why would she be okay with that? I mean, is she that bad that she's cool with it?
I think so.
Just a little bit weird.
I think she knew. I think she was okay with it, But people do weird things for love. We see at this party, Asher treats her like hot garbage, and
that was terrible. I mean, he was already disgusting in my mind because of what he did. But on top of that,
because of the axe murders, you mean?
Yeah. But then on top of that, when he was so degrading to women, I was like, oh no, this is terrible.
Right, exactly. He basically offers Jimmy a turn with her.
Yeah.
It's crazy how awful of a guy this guy is. But he's his performance. It reminded me a lot of the Joker, where he was kind of captivating, and he had this weird twisted charisma.
Too, that was also similar.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he had this weird charisma that kind of that made him compelling to watch. But they know that they're fleeing, so they track him down to Duke's private jet, where we find out Duke's been stabbed. Jimmy, I think Asher is. He's done with his help. He doesn't want his dad's help anymore. He's outlived his usefulness. And so he just straight up stabs him.
And I wonder where he was going to go, because they were on the plane. He killed his dad. What was his next step?
Right. Yeah. Well, they're in Seattle. Where do we think? Did they think? I imagine they might have been trying to go to Japan, something like that, because we find out that Duke put just enough fuel in the plane to get them an hour over the ocean, and then they were just going to crash.
And I guess he was going to kill the girlfriend too.
Right. Which
he's okay with that.
She's an accomplice. It's fine. But yeah, I think that Duke didn't want. Even in these kind of his final moments, and what he must have known as his final moments, he didn't want Asher going through that long drawn out process of the trial and possibly sitting on death row and things like that. So I think he probably figured, if we all go down in a blaze of glory, everything will be fine. No one will ever find out. The company will be better for it. We won't get that bad publicity of my son being an axe murderer.
But why wouldn't he just kill his son and get away with it and just stay alive? Why would he kill himself too?
That becomes a lot trickier. Killing someone and then covering it up, rather than everyone just going down in one plane crash. I think that doesn't leave behind as much of a trail of breadcrumbs.
I guess, yeah.
I mean, can't really speculate on how these people are thinking, because these are obviously extreme circumstances. But we get that conversation between Duke and Jimmy on the plane, where Duke kind of repeatedly asks him if he's a father, if he has kids, trying to find some common ground.
That whole conversation was just really sad and disturbing to me.
It's pretty depressing.
Because you could tell how much he loved his son, and he repeatedly tried to give him a second chance and kept trying to help him.
I see what you did there.
Kept trying to help him, but ultimately it was no use.
Right. And I think in a weird way, Jimmy did kind of learn from that conversation, how to really care for his son, and to kind of do whatever he could to protect him. Maybe not cover up murders, but go to these lengths. And then we get this awesome epic battle between Super Jimmy and Super Asher.
That can be Batman and Joker.
Exactly, yeah. They're both only just realizing the extent of their capabilities, and Asher has the samurai sword that he's kind of whipping around, cutting his leg, cutting his arm with, things like that. But eventually and just like last week, and I feel like this is going to be a recurring theme, that one thing that Jimmy told him to watch out for comes back around, that right cross. Duvall comes in and he distracts him with the gun and he just decks him, because he offers Asher at the party. He says, I can help you in the ring. I can help you kind of.
I think I missed that part.
You might have, but he was, he tells Asher, I can help you with that right cross, in the ring. You can kind of not get the hell beaten out of you by your dad all the time.
Interesting.
And Asher passes him up and we see what happens. It all comes full circle.
And then the girl comes with her gun.
She comes with her gun. She comes guns blazing, literally, and Jimmy jumps in the way and literally takes multiple bullets for Duvall. And Duvall kind of uses that chance to handcuff her and put her in custody. And Jimmy, because he took these bullets for Duvall, he demands to be taken not to the hospital, but to Looking Glass to Mary Goodwin. And that's when we see Duvall is. He wants the truth because he knows he's being lied to left, right, and center.
He knows. And in the car, when Jimmy starts saying all these things that about he's sorry and things like that, if he hadn't told him the truth by the end of the episode, I think Duvall would have caught on.
Right.
I don't think he would have understood completely.
Yeah, we couldn't have kept that up for many more episodes if he's sitting there saying, "Oh, I should have gone to your baseball games. I should have treated your mom right."
Yeah,
it's like in Reservoir Dogs, that scene between Harvey Keitel and Tim Roth. There's this weird bonding over someone dying of gunshot wounds in the back seat. And what I thought was interesting is that how much of this was him literally dying of blood loss, and how much of it was his timer running out.
Maybe more the timer, because when he gets back and he goes in the tank, he seems fine.
Right.
So,
and do we think that tank is almost kind of like this Weapon X sort of thing, where it can literally just heal these injuries?
I guess so, because I was wondering how it was going to heal these bullet holes.
Right, exactly. Well, let's add Wolverine to the list of characters that Jimmy Pritchard is like. He says, "For once in your life, listen to me," to Duvall, and it's this really kind of intimate moment of father-son bonding. And on the way there, I really didn't think that even after all these hints that he drops in the back seat, I really didn't think that they were going to go with this. But he finally gets him to the Goodwins. He finally gets him in that tank, and I love the cinematography and the blocking of the scene, because we see Jimmy in the foreground, or we see Duvall rather in the foreground, just looking at Jimmy in this tank. And in the background, we see Otto and Mary, and Otto's kind of pleading with Mary in twin speak that he won't understand. Even as threatened and as kind of overprotective as Otto feels, I think he does kind of feel for Duvall that he's not going to understand, that this is just going to cause more pain than it does catharsis.
I think so. But then Mary says, look how lost he is.
Right.
And I think she sees that at least telling him the truth will give him a little more peace.
Right. And when she started saying that, I was watching this in bed this morning, and I literally just like bolted upright. So I'm like, no way, not in episode 3. This cannot happen already in episode 3.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I would have thought at least like episode 5 or something like that.
And so Duvall is kind of frantically asking, who is he? Why was he saying these things? Why does he think he's my father? And Mary says, because he is. Because he is. What? I mean, I love it.
Definitely caught me off guard.
I loved that moment, and this really pulled me in. This really got me. I'm so invested in the dynamic between Jimmy and Duvall that I really want to see where it goes from here. And I think that was a curveball that I wasn't expecting.
I wonder if Duvall is going to have some hesitation believing this,
right,
just because it is so weird.
Sure.
But then again, he's looking at him in a tank, and
right,
that's already a little bit weird.
Right.
He's miraculously saved.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, it's funny that you ponder these things, because it's time for predictions, y'all. Can we get the yes?
And now, your Afterbuzz TV predictions.
Oh, so good. If we can get just like UFO lights and sounds on every single episode of every show ever.
We just need a little drone. We
need a little looking glass UAV drone. Yes. I love that thing. I love that when Duvall is outside the gate, it's just kind of hovering there, just like staring at him.
Love it.
So where do we think they go from here now that Duvall knows?
I wonder how he's going to react to this news. I don't know if he's going to believe it completely.
Right.
But I think there's enough evidence that he's going to just be in disbelief, but eventually come around and believe it.
Sure.
What do you
yeah,
think?
I think they're in this kind of reality that's supposed to be like ours. So you got to think, if someone told you that they were brought back literally from the dead, how hard it would be to believe. So I think now that kind of the onus of the show is off of Duval finding out, now it's going to be Gracie finding out. Because I think that she, as a child, is going to have I guess not a child, so to speak. I mean,
she looks young, but I think she's in high school.
She looks so young, but we saw that college tour in episode 1. Yeah. So let's say like 17, let's say 17. Even at 17, you're not equipped. I don't think even full-grown adults are equipped to handle something like resurrection, you know?
I feel like she would believe it more than others because she already sees the similarities between Jimmy and her grandpa.
Right.
So maybe she wouldn't be that surprised.
And she maybe isn't quite as sort of like scientific thinking. I mean, even though obviously it was science that brought him back, she might be a little bit more, inclined to believe than her dad is.
Scientifically, when Duval does that DNA test, there are some funky results there.
Right.
So they kind of have that on their side too.
Sure. Yeah, he knows for sure that obviously he is some sort of familial match. So we'll see. We'll see if he goes with the flow in episode 4. We'll see who else finds out. We'll see what other sort of super villains are going to come after Jimmy and Duval, who are, once again, just like Batman and Robin, guys, just a crime-fighting duo, father and son. The one of them's a super buff $6 million man superhero cop. But you know what? It's fine.
Something also I wonder is in Frankenstein, the original Frankenstein comes back and he eventually kills his creator.
Right.
So I wonder what's going to happen along those lines. Like, is he going to cause trouble?
Do you think he's going to start maybe resenting the fact that Otto and Mary brought him back?
I don't think he's going to kill them, but I think there's got to be some link between the original.
He might beat the you-know-what out of Otto, maybe, if pushed enough. But, guys, we're only on episode 3 of this friggin' show, and there's so much to unpack, and I love it. But we're going to be right back here next week for episode 4. But for now,
Sunday at 7 again.
Sunday at 7, we're at our brand new time. Now that Second Chance is on a new night, we're on a new night. So now we are on Sunday nights at 7 p.m. for the rest of season 1. But for now, Jamie, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter and Instagram at JamieBanks_. I love to tweet, and I'll definitely tweet you back, so tweet me.
And she reads every comment.
I read every comment.
Be nice, be gentle.
Say my hair looks great or something like that.
I'll
read it.
You're fine. It looks awesome. As always, you can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, at Ty Matthews PMA, and you can find me on various other after shows on Monday Night Raw and The Magicians on Mondays, Pitch Slapped on Tuesdays, and the brand new Lucha Underground after show on Thursdays. That's right, guys. We're talking Lucha Libre. Just as many superheroes as Second Chance. But as I said, we'll be right back here. Same bat time, same bat channel. But until then, take a chance, guys. Peace.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Afterbuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the Afterbuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterbuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of Afterbuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of Afterbuzz TV or its owners or principals.